You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host, Nick Schreck, and joining me tonight is your favorite fantasy analyst, my favorite fantasy analyst. It's Nick Walsh. What's up, bud?
Nothing, man. I'm just hanging out. It is almost time for our wonderful draft. In just a couple days, you and the rest of the wonderful gentlemen from our league will be flying out to beautiful San Francisco, where we are going to get drunk and draft some fantasy football teams. So it's an exciting fucking week, man. What's going on with you?
Not much, man. I find myself struggling to get things done around the house because I'm going back and forth between mock drafts, ADPs, and just kind of tuning in wherever I can and trying to get stuff out because it's, quite frankly, the best time of the year. And that's pretty much consumed every waking moment. And I know that Kate is not thrilled about
it. Yeah, I'm sure so. I was talking with one of the directors in my company, a big boss for me today, and kind of not accidentally, but I brought up the studies that have been done about how much work productivity is lost due to fantasy football. Oh, and yeah. While I was just talking about how into fantasy football I am, and it was oh yeah, but I totally don't do that, and afterwards I was oh man, I just should have kept my fucking mouth shut,
So basically what you're saying is you're going to be jobless come next week, and then you can just focus on fantasy football full time, which was probably your plan.
Yeah, absolutely. That's at least subconsciously what I wanted to do. So hopefully it worked out. Hopefully my subconscious is guiding me in the right direction, because if not, I'm fucked.
Yeah, well, dude, just win a couple fantasy football leagues, get involved in DraftKings a little bit, and quite frankly, I don't see how you can lose. It's all money in the bank. Just you got to float yourself a couple months, but you just get to December as a champ, and I mean, it's fucking worth it.
Yeah, I'm just going to bank the Millionaire Maker, I think, week one,
should be easy enough.
And there you go. Yeah, I mean, no problem, right?
Yeah, it's easy peasy, Walsh. You'll be the next millionaire, and we'll all just be try to ride your coattails, probably fail, and you'll go on to work at ESPN as LTFF fades off into the distance. But we are I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped to get out to San Fran. Actually, I was laughing. I texted Vinny, Don, and our buddy Quarter the other day because we're all flying out of Jersey together for San Fran for the draft. And I got an email from United we're giving you a free upgrade to Comfort Plus, or I don't know. I don't fly a lot, but they were we're upgrading you for free. So I sent it to the group. We all booked at the same time. And I'm oh, hey, did you guys get this? That'd be sweet. We all get upgraded. And they were all no, fuck you. You're the only one that gave you an upgrade, and it's going to cost us $600 each to get the same seat they just offered you. So they're a little upset. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, they can fuck themselves, and you'll be flying in comfort.
Yeah, comfort with some total strangers on my long flight to San Francisco. So I was a little bummed because now I'm going to be stuck with those second class citizens, Vinny, Don, and Tyler, as we all sit in the back together because they just can't spring for the extra $600.
Hey, whatever works, man. It'll figure itself out, I suppose.
Yeah, it'll all work itself out. But it leads up to a super awesome weekend, super pumped. But at this point, Walsh, I think we might as well get into it, right? You ready to rock?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, guys, start mocking. If you haven't been mocking, it's a little late, but get mocking everything from here until you have your fantasy football draft. You should be thinking ADPs and players. We know you're just as psycho as we are about fantasy football. And Walsh, Vinny and I touched on it in yesterday's podcast, but I want to talk about it with you too because it's the biggest news out there right now. Shocking news, Andrew Luck retirement. And it affects the Colts from the top all the way to the bottom. For NFL, for fantasy, and kind of the whole gamut, if you will. So, Andrew Luck, we wish you the best in retirement, and hope you get things right for yourself. But from a fantasy football perspective, are you in panic mode, or is this just recency bias overreaction mode by everybody?
No, I think it's worth a lot of concern. I mean, just right away, Vegas dropped the win total from the Colts for the Colts from 9.5 games to 6.5 games. So that kind of shows, what they had in mind. And it's not that I think Jacoby Brissett's bad. I think he can be a good quarterback this year. But we were hoping that Andrew Luck was going to support Marlon Mack, T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell potentially, Devin Funches, Eric Ebron, maybe Jack Doyle. Like, that's a lot of people to support. At this point, I don't think you're really downgrading T.Y. too much. Like, T.Y. is still going to get his. But Mack, I'm concerned about, because even though they've used him full time in the preseason, last year he was very, very game script dependent. And if we're expecting them, if Vegas takes 3 wins off their win total, Max splits in wins and losses are drastic. So if we're expecting them to lose 3 more games, that's 3 more games where, if Max usage from last year continues, he's potentially unusable. Again, they've used him more in the preseason. They've had him in basically with all the starter snaps, but I don't know whether to take that as gospel at this point. So yeah, I'm afraid on everyone. I mean, I wasn't drafting Ebron to begin with. Funches and Campbell were maybe late round flyers for me, but I'm afraid on pretty much everyone except for TY.
Okay. So I feel like a bit of an idiot if you guys listened to the previous podcast talking about Marlon Mack. But I'll start with TY, and I agree with you. I think, he's dropped Walsh. He's gone from the 6th pick in the 3rd round for 12-team PPR leagues, courtesy of Fantasy Football Calculator on Sunday, to currently the 12th pick in the 4th round. That's Tuesday, August 27th. So he's dropped almost, we'll call it a round and a half, maybe closing in on 2 rounds in, 50, 60 something hours from the Andrew Luck news. It feels like a bit of a value for me. I know we're slightly concerned, but I think he still gets his. I think you're just getting him around later.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. He's a consistent dude and very talented. We know what he can do.
Yeah, and he's going to get his from Brissett. I mean, you look at, he's going around Cooper Kupp, Kenny Golladay, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, AJ Green. I mean, I'll take TY over kind of that whole grouping based on just what I know from TY.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think you're correct. A lot of those guys are guys that I have concerns about as well. So, I mean, where TY is going now, we're past the point of these are the clear elites, and into the guys who have question marks for various different reasons. So I don't think TY's question marks are really any larger than any of theirs.
Totally agree. Marlon Mack, on the other hand, is someone that when Vinny and I kind of broke him down, we obviously we didn't look at splits and everything else, and we were just kind of we really think same thing with Marlon Mack, maybe an over adjustment. I mean, he's down 8 spots since Sunday. Again, I think the drop is somewhat justified, but I think he's still okay price there. But what you're sharing about the splits is a little bit concerning. And obviously that's information that we weren't looking at yesterday. I think everybody else is undraftable. Again, like you said, I wasn't going after Ebron, but the rest of it, I don't care about any other Colts minus Marlon Mack, T.Y. Hilton. And you've got me slightly scared on Marlon Mack here.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where, again, you're in the range of running backs, and he was sort of the start of that range before this happened, where all of these guys have some sort of concern. You're not getting anyone who's just, a straight up every down back going to be, used on passing downs and running downs in every single game. It's just not something you're getting. So, I mean, I still don't think Mack's a bad pick where he's going, and the fact that he's fallen a little bit, might be correcting his price to something that I would agree with.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm just concerned, with whether they will use him or whether Nyheim Hines will get some work if they fall behind. I mean, in the preseason, it's been all sunshine and roses, but when you're getting the first 20 snaps of the game, you don't really have a chance to fall behind by 14 points and have to go into some of those sets where you're using more of your passing down back.
Very true. Very true. Also, people need to take that into consideration as they go into drafts here. I do want to ask you, so Marlon Mack's going 10th pick in the 4th round here. Melvin Gordon, 3rd pick in the 4th round. One, where do you stand with Melvin Gordon? And, just kind of in comparison, because obviously we got red flags on Mack, but at least he's on the field, right? So are you more comfortable with Marlon Mack at 4.10 or Melvin Gordon at 4.3?
I'm more comfortable with Mack there. Gordon, I've been avoiding at all costs because he can sit out up to 8 games. Like I can't do that to myself. So I mean, until he falls to literally the 6th or 7th round, I'm not doing it. And even then, I'd rather someone else just take that value. And if it works out for them, so be it, because keeping a guy on your bench for 8 weeks fucking sucks when you need to pick people up. But yeah, I mean, Mack has his concerns, but to me, a guy who could hold out half the season, not going to take the risk on it ahead of a guy like Marlon Mack.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Vinny and I both kind of said he's off our boards in the theory that he's never going to get to a spot. He'll never last to a spot where we'd be comfortable taking him. As you said, as he gets to those later rounds, there's no way we're gonna own him in any leagues. So just again, it's such an interesting name, and I don't want to take us necessarily away from here, but I do want to ask you about Ezekiel Elliott, right? Because he's the other one that is in the same situation, right? He does need to show up at some point. I kind of talked for a little bit on the podcast with Vinny about how I don't know why. I don't really have any reasoning behind it, but the good old Don gut in me makes me believe that he's going to show up in the first couple of weeks. So I'm less worried about Zeke. Do you share that, or are you just as worried about Zeke as you are Melvin Gordon?
I own Tony Pollard in almost every league that I'm in. So that's kind of my opinion on Zeke. I do not own any Zeke. I own a fuck ton of Tony Pollard. Could that bite me? Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I don't, yeah, I'm just, I agree with you that I think there should be less concern about Zeke than there is about Melvin Gordon.
Yep.
But Zeke is also generally still going off the board in the mid first round.
Oh dude, it's crazy.
So hard. Yeah, I don't get the discrepancy in opinions between Zeke and Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon's dropped to the 5th. Zeke is just still in the mid first.
It is crazy. I mean, Vinny and I talked about it. We've seen him go number 1 in leagues. I've watched him go 2 in one of my drafts. People are not scared on Zeke. And it's quite frankly concerning. Again, I still share the sentiment that I do believe he shows up. You still have to pay up for Tony Pollard, but I don't get as your, I think you said it on your draft strategy podcast in that first round, and you talked about it with Pollard. You need a surefire guy, right? A guy that's not gonna burn you, and when he's there, he's gonna be elite. We know that, but you don't know when that's gonna come, and that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that I'm looking to do.
Fair enough. So we'll stay away there, guys. So let's take it over to Lamar Miller. Torn ACL. Obviously, a bunch of people have already drafted, so they could have owned Lamar Miller, lost him. The Andrew Luck retirement obviously falls into play here. Duke Johnson is the lead back for the Houston Texans. And as a guy that's going to get guaranteed touches and carries, I think obviously someone you have to like. I'm just trying to pull up his ADP here as we look. 4th pick in the 6th round, going literally 1 pick after Austin Eckler. A couple of picks before Tariq Cohen. He has skyrocketed from August 19th. He was the 2nd pick in the 9th round. He's now the 4th pick in the 6th round. He's a roller coaster to the top right now, Walsh.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm not really sure what to do with him here, which is, obviously not what you want to hear or not what I want to say when we have to draft so quickly and the season's approaching so quickly. But I think there's a couple things to think about here, and I'll kind of lay them out as pros and cons of him. So the pros here, Duke Johnson's good. Everything that he's done in the NFL has showed him to be a very efficient back. He's obviously going to get at least passing down work, even if they don't make him a bell cow. And he's always been efficient in that. He's been efficient when he's been asked to run the ball, even though it's been sparingly. Yep. So I think that's undeniable at this point, is that Duke Johnson is a legitimately good running back. Another pro is that he's handled a bell cow workload in college before. Duke Johnson got almost 20 carries per game when he was at Miami. Duke Johnson, when he left Miami, was their all-time leader in rushing yards, I believe. So some of the reason that he's become such a passing down back is because there were some health concerns later in that. But he's done it before. He's done it in college, and though he hasn't been asked to do it at the NFL level, it's not like we have zero track record of this. Another thing is that Duke Johnson's been healthy his entire NFL career, and that could just be, again, he's been used sparingly, but he hasn't missed games. And then one more pro, I suppose, would be that the Texans traded a third-round pick for him. You don't trade a third-round pick for someone that you just plan on sitting around and doing jack shit with unless you're a really dumb franchise. So they have the sort of investment to want to use him. Now, if we look at the cons here, Bill O'Brien and Deshaun Watson, you can put the blame on whoever you want there. I would tend to put it on O'Brien. They haven't passed the ball to the running back a lot. That's been a thing. Like the past 2 years, I've been like, Lamar Miller theoretically should get a lot of targets. He doesn't. So maybe that's a function of their personnel. Maybe that's a function of the way they run the offense. Maybe that's a function of Deshaun Watson not liking throwing to the running back. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem like a particularly rosy outlook there. Also, the offensive line fucking sucks ass. It's a bottom 2 offensive line in the league. They're not going to be good. And then another con there is that Bill O'Brien's play calling for the past couple of years has been to run the running back into the back of the offensive line. So rather than use the fact that it's a bad or acknowledge that it's a bad offensive line and try to get the ball in the running back's hands creatively, maybe get him in space, maybe run him outside, whatever you need to do, he has been stubborn and just run the ball into the back of a terrible line. So there's a lot of reasons to like it and a lot of reasons to really dislike it. And that's why I think I'm so confused, is because I'm going through and just kind of being like, well, which side here wins out?
Yeah,
and I don't know the answer.
I'll throw another con on the pile here for you, Walsh. And I think that con is the news coming out of Miami, right? I don't know if you've heard this yet. Miami Herald's Barry Jackson says Kenyan Drake and Kenny Stills are possible trade bait in a potential deal for Jadeveon Clowney. So you could possibly be looking at a Kenyan Drake, Duke Johnson combo. And look, I'm not singing Kenyan Drake's praises, but we're now going from Duke Johnson being the guy to possibly another guy who Bill O'Brien is going to give some work to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's totally possible. And even if that scenario doesn't play out, another scenario that I've seen floated that I think is totally feasible would be the Chiefs cutting Carlos Hyde, who is running behind the Williamses and Darwin Thompson, and the Texans just immediately picking him up to get that early down work. And now you're back in a situation where Duke Johnson is just sort of a satellite back on a team that doesn't like to throw the ball to running backs. So I don't know, man. The whole thing has a lot of moving parts. I think there's definitely upside to taking him there. It's not like you have to spend like a top 4 round pick on him. Like you said, early 6th round, if the guy going right before it is Austin Eckler, who could be, benched at any point in the season, it's not like the floor of Duke Johnson is particularly different than Austin Eckler's floor, though they are for different reasons. But yeah, it's not an unfair price, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree, Walsh. Again, just who knows, more moves could be coming. That's obviously going to have fallout here. Bill O'Brien also is not hopeful that Kiki Kuti will be back for week 1. And so obviously that's a blow to that offense. And we'll see how long he's out.
But it could be a boon for Duke.
It could be a boon for Duke. You're right. That could be a pro there for Duke.
So, I mean, yeah, lots of moving parts.
And what you want to believe in. Cam Newton, we hear good news on. He's expected back in week 1, according to Ron Rivera. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he was pretty stern and adamant that he will be there in week 1, which is a good thing for people that own Cam. Like me, in a lot of places, I drafted Andrew Luck before his retirement news, which cut me deep. Cut me very, very, very deep. But let's see. There's no doubt in my mind was Rivera's exact answer. So he will be ready to rock and roll, Walshy. So count on Scam.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. As someone who's been investing in DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel all over the fucking place, could definitely use some Cam in my life.
Well, Cam will be there while she's there to make you happy and bring you everything you want in this world. Hopefully a salary as well when you lose your job. San Francisco 49ers, while she starting wide receivers will be Pettis, Goodwin, and Matthews in the slot with Deebo Samuel as the number 4. Let's start with Dante Pettis because I'm trying to find the quote. I got a sleeper, I think it was a sleeper bot alert today, and I don't remember the exact quote, so don't hold me to it, but it was something about how all this hype around Pettis has been to try and motivate him, and they're trying to find a way to kind of push him and keep him going, and that some people were concerned that it's more fluff than reality.
Yeah, it's been really puzzling because, you generally see coaches trying to talk up young players to try and give them a confidence boost. And that's the opposite of what's happening here. Yeah. I don't know. I've been having trouble reading it, but I mean, Pettis' ADP has fallen pretty accordingly with this news. So it's something where I'm not upset at taking him where he's going to be. I mean, at the end of the day, he's the most likely person to be the number 1 wide receiver on an offense that I think is going to be pretty good. Whether or not these are motivational tactics or he's really, not living up to Shanahan's expectations in certain ways, we've seen him do it on the field. Yes. He was pretty good at the end of last year. And I think that's the most important thing here.
So don't lose sight of that. I mean, like you said, Walsh, he's down almost since Sunday, August 11th. He's down almost 3 full rounds in a matter of 3 weeks. So, he's down in the Sammy Watkins, MVS, Marvin Jones territory of wide receivers, which, like you said, for a starting guy, ain't too shabby. What do you think about Goodwin? Is actually a guy I see here, a guy going very late in drafts that I'm willing to invest in. He's costing you a 14th round pick. He was a guy who I liked last year a lot. I expected big things out of. Obviously did not pan out for me, and it put me in some bad spots. But there's no reason that I'm not willing to take a 14th round flyer on him. And is someone that I actually own a decent amount of so far in my drafts.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he's a pretty decent target at the end there. You don't really have to take him you might not get him in the very, very last round, the 16th or 17th or whatever. But I think 14th, that kind of thing, you can generally grab him, and I'm not against it. I mean, again, he's going to be on the field. We know about his speed. We know he can stretch the field. So he's not a guy that you need a gigantic volume of targets for in order to get a good week out of. And he's a guy that if you just, throw him in on a bye week and maybe get lucky, that's kind of what you're drafting him for.
100%. It's about maybe something clicks or something happens or whatever. But, he's I think he definitely has the upside as we kind of move forward. Although the 49ers have not been quite what we expected, right? I know you shared some concern when you did your draft strategy podcast there on what the 49ers were expected to be versus what they've shown so far.
Yeah, Garoppolo's been pretty bad. I'm kind of choosing to ignore that. No, well, not ignore it, but I'm choosing to believe that I think he's going to put it together. I think a lot of the sort of growing pessimism or confusion about the wide receiver core there, I think really what it's done for me is really solidified George Kittle as a guy that I'm targeting big time in the late second or early third. Because if we're not sure on these receivers and maybe they're cycling in and out rookies and different guys throughout the year or that kind of thing, like Kittle's going to be the anchor to that passing game. So for me, I'm going to take this as a positive for George Kittle, and I've wound up with him in almost every draft that I've done.
You know, we talk about being fluid in drafts, Walsh, with strategy and stuff, but you know, as you're seeing these kind of things develop, is this becoming a target of yours where your strategy a lot has become getting him early and kind of building your team around that? Or are you still,
Yeah, it's 100% one of those things where like if I have an early pick, like somewhere like 1 through 5 or whatever, and Kittle's sitting there in the third round, it's an auto pick for me. It's like not even a decision.
Okay. Fantastic. So you're all in. You know what you like, and George Kittle is what you like.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic, Walshy. Fantastic. All right. You know, we touched on a possible Kenyan Drake situation with Houston. Return to practice. He has dropped to running back 39, 9th pick in the 7th round. You know, I was in this situation, and about what do we think about Kenyan Drake there, right? Because I did a draft I went Friday night, this last Saturday night, and I was in a spot where Kenyan Drake was, I don't want to say forced in front of me because I put myself in the position, but I want to give you my team, and I'll explain why I was kind of in the spot, Walsh. It was a 12-team half-point PPR, so I was the 11th pick, and I started off with Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Keenan Allen as my first 3 picks. We start 3 wide receivers. So pretty tit start to my half-point PPR for wide receivers, but in turn it led me to a very weak running back situation. So I start with David Montgomery as my 1, and then I've got a mix of Austin Eckler, James White, LaShawn McCoy, Royce Freeman as my next backs. Little yikes, right? So I came to a point, and I'm trying to find where exactly he went off the board for me, where I was comfortable rolling the dice, so to say, on Kenyan Drake, you know, because he's been banged up. He really hasn't, I don't know, he hasn't done enough to ever, like, wow me where I feel like he could give me that upside, and I still don't know if there's enough there for me, even at his late 7th round pick.
Yeah, it's a little tough, and you know, like we talked about those trade talks and everything, and also like if he stays in Miami, like Miami's going to suck. Miami's going to be bad. Yeah. And I mean, if he goes to Houston, he's running behind a bad offensive line, and Duke Johnson's going to take the passing work. So I don't know. It's tough. You're right. He seems like one of those draft picks that like you might be forced into, and you're just gonna fucking hate it. You know, like it's just gonna make you upset.
Like even in a situation like that where I just need backs because I need the hope that someone pops. You know, again, I have value elsewhere, but I need something to work out, right? And I don't think there's even like a 1% of me that believes Kenyan Drake is ever going to be the guy that pops for me. And I think that's what scares me, because if you go a certain way early in the draft, I just don't know that in good faith I could recommend to someone that, you know, he's going to be meh. He's never going to be a sexy pick. I just don't believe he's ever going to be enough to really super outshine his ADP. And I think he just kind of is what it is. You need a back. He'll be fine. But like you said, bad situations all around. A lot of hate, I think, for Kenyan Drake coming out of me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't have that much hate for Kalen Ballage. Like I've been ending up with him a little bit, but like theoretically I should have the same dislike because he's going to be a committee back on a bad team unless Drake gets traded. I don't know. It might just be that we've seen Kenyan Drake be very frustrating to own in the past already, where we haven't. Kalen Ballage is more of an unknown, and that's what's causing that particular bias in me. But yeah, it's a weird conflict of thoughts or reasoning in my head that I can't quite explain.
I'm with it because as I'm sitting here, we're talking about it. I'm just like, man, like. I wanna be able to convince myself or convince some people that Kenyan Drake's okay if you're in that spot, but there's literally, I just don't think any part of me that has any confidence in that. And it's like you said, we've seen Kenyan Drake. I just feel like we know what he is, and he's a non-sexy guy on your bench who you hope you never have to play, but are probably going to be forced into it 1 week, and you're going to fucking hate it.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
So I think that pretty much sums up Kenyan Drake, guys. So if you ever need some talking off the ledge on him, just rewind back to this part of the clip, and that'll tell you everything you possibly need to know. Walsh, in the pre-podcast here, you put together a couple of names of some favorite late round flyers for you guys, mostly going undrafted, guys you're willing to roll the dice on. Again, they don't cost you anything that late. Who are a couple of those guys that you like and why?
Yeah, and just to, I mean, you already did, but just to qualify this, like, I'm not saying like go out and draft these guys in the 12th round. Like, this is like last pick in your draft, or last wide receiver, running back type pick in your draft, where you're just looking to like blow a flyer on someone. And one of these guys, I'll start with the guy who I think is getting slowly off this list for me, but Jerron Brown was a guy that I was taking in this spot for a little while, because DK Metcalf and David Moore are both currently hurt. Pete Carroll seems hopeful on Metcalf to be back for week 1, but we'll see. If he's not, then Jerron Brown is immediately a starter for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We saw Tyler Lockett get not many targets and still be very, very productive for Russell Wilson last year. We saw David Moore down the stretch have some very usable games. So Jerron Brown could jump right into that role. Again, keep an eye on the injuries. The other two that I've been doing a lot of best ball drafts, and like I just have like a fucking obscene amount of DJ Shark of the Jaguars, and the reason for that is I think he hasn't gotten much hype. The hype has really gone to Fournette and D.D. Westbrook, and I think deservedly so. But Shark hasn't really been playing in the preseason games because of an injury. That being said, all summer and during training camp, he was consistently talked about as the most impressive wide receiver in Jaguars camp. He's a second-year guy. He's a really good athlete. He's going to be playing on the outside for an offense that, brand new quarterback, and also brand new offensive coordinator that we know likes to pass the ball a lot. So athletic freak, not being drafted, going to be on the field for at least 80% snaps for a team that should theoretically want to pass the ball a decent amount. Like, yeah, makes perfect sense to me as a last round type flyer. And then the other guy is Brashad Perryman. And that's because he's basically been shown to be the guy who Bruce Arians is going to use to clear out the defense in his new offense with Tampa Bay. So Perryman in 3 wide receiver sets is going to be on the field. They're going to kick Chris Godwin into the slot in these sets and get Perryman out there. And they're going to have him running deep routes for a coach and a quarterback who like to throw the ball deep. So I don't think he's going to be a consistent week-to-week starter. I don't think Brashad Perryman will ever be that in his career, probably. But like, can he have some weeks where he catches 3 passes for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns? 100%. So again, a guy that, you're not rolling into week 1 with, but might end up being productive for you at some point during the year.
Fantastic, Walsh. Well, I love the breakdown and insight there, and I wish I had some counter names to kind of add to the list, but you're so deep into those late rounds that I am not qualified to even throw names out there, because when you ask me for guys, I'm talking like Anthony Miller in round 11, like guys that I like late, but in most of my drafts, I end up with QB, tight end, kicker, defense for my last 4 rounds. So for me, 11 and 12 is typically as deep as I get when I start, quote unquote, rolling the dice on people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's fair. I mean, these are guys who, like, the reason I'm saying like Shark and Perryman in particular too, is that a lot of these other guys in that range are guys who, like, we kind of know their role, and we know it's not as a fantasy starter, Whereas these guys, again, we're looking at the unknown a little bit and trying to project a ceiling, as opposed to looking at like fucking Quincy and Nunwa and being like, oh, right, he's going to be the third most targeted wide receiver on Adam Gase's team. You know, like it's things like that where you want to, like in those rounds, I'm not looking for any kind of consistency. Yep. I'm looking to take a shot at the moon here.
Yeah, well, and especially like you said, you know, you're in a lot of best ball leagues, and you're taking your shot on guys that things could work out. You know, because that upside is so immense for you in a best ball league, right? I mean, the value that they could provide versus one of these guys who's just meh is so different.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I mean, you know, those are some names to look out for, guys. Obviously, you've heard the other ones that we've thrown out on podcasts and other things people have looked at. You know, I do like myself a lot of Anthony Miller, but we'll leave that for another day. You know, one guy I want to specifically ask you about, Walsh, and we touched on him before. You own him pretty much everywhere. Tony Pollard, right? He's going the 9th pick in the 9th round. So he is steadily climbing, rightfully so, but he's gone from I'm trying to go back a week. Today's the 27th. So if you go back to August 20th, he was the 9th pick in the 12th round. He's currently the 9th pick in the 9th round. So he's up two whole rounds in 7 days. How high is too high for Tony Pollard?
Yeah, I think he's starting to hit sort of that ceiling for me.
Okay.
It's one of those where the first time I drafted him was last Saturday, and I took him in the 14th, and then a couple days later I took him in the 12th, and then a couple days later I took him in the 11th. Like it has been that sort of steady rise, and yeah, like 9th round, like I'm willing to take him there still. But if he continues to rise higher, I don't know if I will, just because again, he's a guy who I think could really help you. He also could be usable for like precisely 1 week of the season. I know, you know, optimists would like to project that he's earned himself a role within that offense, even if Zeke does come back, because he has been legitimately very, very good this preseason. And he's a guy who was used a little creatively in college too. He was lined up as a wide receiver sometimes. He's not just a pure running back. That being said, I don't for a second buy that he is at all fantasy usable the second that Zeke comes back. So 9th round, yes, I think I can do that, but it's really pushing it. And if he continues to rise, I will no longer be taking Tony Pollard in every draft I'm in.
Well, I mean, hey, when you're getting him in the 12th round, I mean, I can understand why you own him everywhere, right? That's a great price because even if Zeke does come back and you get a week or two out of him, whatever, for that price, you're fucking pumped because you probably got great points for a 12th round pick. It's fucking worth it. But as he climbs, you're right, things get a little dangerous. You know, do you think Austin Eckler, who's in a similar situation but will hold some standalone value, he's up at the beginning of the 6th round. Are you more okay with that price there because he could hold some standalone value if Melvin Gordon shows up?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Eckler's a guy who for a portion of the season last year, I was starting in my flex in a couple of leagues. It wasn't an ideal situation, but with Gordon healthy, he was a guy who could still get you 10 or 12 points on a week. Pollard, I'm not really sure that he holds that same kind of value.
I am right there with you. Who else? Is there anybody else, Walshy, in ADPs or guys you're seeing in drafts that kind of have you puzzled or names you think we need to talk about here as we go into arguably the biggest draft weekend of the year?
Yeah, there's one guy, and I'll defer to you on this because sure. He's on your team, but Darwin Thompson has fucking shot up draft boards. I saw him. I mean, this is above ADP. I saw him go in the 6th round the other day.
Wow.
I think he's a nice little double-digit round flyer. But like, are you as in on Darwin Thompson as some of the stuff that I've been seeing?
Not. I'm in on Darwin Thompson, and I think again, obviously, if you're talking dynasty and some of these places, different world, that's fine. But he's up now to the 5th pick in the 8th round. Which to me is just it's way too high. Look, I love my Chiefs. I love what we're seeing out of Thompson, and I won't lie. I have had some skepticism on Damian Williams about can he hold up? What's the full workload look like? Carlos Hyde, I think, is out. in that conversation of, who we need to be concerned about. But Damian Williams kind of put it on display for us, right? He went out there, big play, big touchdown. He's looked good, so far in the preseason there for Kansas City. So it instills some confidence, but I think we're talking crazy town here with Darwin Thompson, especially in redraft leagues. You're drafting a guy there's no guarantee. He can steal some carries and sure. But I think he's way overpriced right now, Walsh, and I can't get in on him there. I love him. I love the Chiefs. And I'm trying to remove that bias here. There's nothing to indicate right now that he's worth that price. Yeah,
I'm right there with you. I was when someone took him in the 6th, I was like, I get it. I know he's a guy who's been trending upwards, but like the 6th fucking round. But again, to each their own. It could totally work out. Another guy that I've kind of been seeing and rise up the draft boards, not to that extent, but Justice Hill, the running back for the Ravens, and he's another guy who I guess the beat writer speculation and the expert speculation has been that he could be a change of pace guy to Mark Ingram in that offense. Do you see any sort of value in him? I kind of see him as like an 11th, 12th rounder, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, right now he's going 12th pick in the 11th round, so I think he's priced right. Again, you're in that range where when you start picking out guys you think have the opportunity, I think he's a guy that we're going to see a little bit more from. I don't know what week, but week 5, week 6, as we kind of go into the season there. I think Ingram obviously stays the guy there for a little while, but I think Justice Hill gets his, and at some point I think it probably begins to transition. Maybe it's later in the season and we're talking more next year. I tend to be a little early on these guys in the past. If my history is any indication, I'm usually a year early, but I think he's fine for the price here. But I think if he goes much higher, I think he's going to outprice himself for me.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
That's kind of where we stand. I have an interesting question, Walsh, that came in, and I'm going to read it to you live here, and we'll kind of go through it. I'm just seeing if I can find it. Here we go. So question comes in. He says, I'm looking for some advice. On my bench, I've got Breda, Darwin Thompson, and Pollard. I've got to drop one for a kicker, assuming week 1 rolls around and Zeke is still gone. Who do I drop? Also have the option of going kickerless or dropping Delaney Walker and going tight endless. Losing his 3 catches for 25 yards might not be too bad.
Interesting. I'm not sure I'd want to roll into week 1 with a starting position not filled, even if it is Delaney Walker. I think I'd be dropping Darwin Thompson there. Sorry, it was Thompson that you said?
Yes.
It was Thompson.
Yeah, it's Breda, Thompson, and Pollard, assuming Zeke is not shown up.
Yeah, that's tough. I think it would be Thompson for me, just because Breda's another guy. Breda and Pollard I own everywhere, every fucking where. Very, very high on Breda. I think he's legit good, and the type of guy who could, give you flex value every single week, even in a limited role. Pollard we just talked about. Yep. I know Thompson has upside, but man, that's tough. There's really no one else that you must have had a great draft to have no one else that you can drop but any of those guys.
It's a good problem to have, also a bad problem obviously here. I honestly think I'm going tight endless. I know it sounds crazy to, obviously as long as your league doesn't punish you for rolling out lineups that are not full, but again, tight end is, especially at this point, I think a crapshoot. Delaney Walker is nothing special. I think I'd rather put a kicker into my lineup. You find someone with a good matchup, a couple field goals, a couple extra points, you're staring 7 to 10 points in the face for sure. Delaney Walker, who the fuck knows? Maybe he goes off, maybe he doesn't, but I'm going to err on the side that he doesn't. And I would probably wait and see. Pollard, do you hold him and hope that maybe you can sell him to the Zeke owner after a couple weeks? Like you said, there's so many variables here. Darwin Thompson, you could cut, and then, an injury could happen at any point. Does he have a bigger role in the Chiefs offense than I just gave him credit for? I think I would go tight endless week 1 and then reevaluate.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't an option that was listed. I think another thing I would probably explore would be trying to do a 2-for-1 trade. I know no one wants to give up one player for 2, particularly at this point in the season. But I would try and maybe look around and see if you can identify maybe some teams with bad depth, and try and see if you can get a 2-for-1 there. Before the season starts. That way, you're at least getting some value for whoever you would have dropped. And you're not also having to take a 0, in a guaranteed 0 in one position in week 1. That, I mean, it's
a tough spot.
It's so tough for me to recommend just taking a guaranteed 0. I know the upside at tight end and kicker isn't huge, but man, I cannot recommend doing that. I don't think.
That's fair, Walsh. I mean, I get it. I agree. The trade, if you could do a 2-for-1 trade, I think it's your best case scenario. But you got to see if you can pull it off, or I don't know. See if you can scare the Zeke owner into paying up for Pollard. I mean, I know you believe in him and you love him, so you may not be as on board there, but something you can try and make some kind of move there. I think is your best bet.
Yeah, that might be the one, is to target the Zeke owner with Pollard and another player and try and get something in return there.
So like you said, you get some value. We know Zeke's going to show at some point. It's kind of that buy low, sell high. Where's the right answer? Because if he comes back week 3, like you said, Pollard's worthless. So it's definitely a game of cat and mouse, and we wish you the best of luck playing it, because we do not have the answer there. But I mean, Walsh, I think that's going to kind of do it, right? We've done a ton of strategy for the people. We've talked about some risers and fallers, some late round guys. I think we've done as much as we can to get you guys ready for the biggest draft weekend of the year.
Yeah, I think so. If you guys are drafting this weekend, please enjoy it. Please drink 1,000 beers like we plan on doing, or don't, whatever your preference is. But don't judge me for drinking 1,000 beers this weekend. I mean, after this, it'll probably be the week 1 preview.
I'd say, that's probably where you'll see us, guys. So good luck, have fun, draft a championship team, and send those lineups in. Let us take a look at them and see how you guys make out. We're happy to break it down, and Vinny will give you some harsh feedback, and one of us will give you some good feedback, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
enjoy it, guys.
Again, mock until you're dreaming of mocks, and have some fun, guys. But for Nick Walsh, for Let's Talk Fantasy Football, I am Nick Schreck. We will catch you on the flip side.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.